All right, welcome back to week 9. One more week and we're halfway through the season, which is pretty crazy to think about, but here we are. CD Lamb was your top scorer from last week. I think he put up like 35. If only he could have done that for me on that Monday night that I ended up getting eliminated, but it is what it is. Let's get into it. Starting off, Fleming is gone, gets 11th place. Made it pretty far. Didn't have a terrible team. He just didn't get it done last week. He recently traded away Kenneth Walker. That wouldn't have saved him this week if he had Walker. I think Walker had the worst game of his season, but he's having a great season, so it's not saying much. But he just had weak running backs this week. Had a dud from Devontae Adams on Monday, so that's just, you hate to see that. It was a large margin between Saunders and second to last. Everyone except for Saunders scored over 100, which is pretty wild to see that. I don't think that'll happen every week. I mean, it's only going to keep going up, but I can imagine next week there'll be multiple teams under 100. But anyway, 11th place. The top 25% of last week, we got JC and Jake. An average score from these guys of 137. That's up 2% from last week of 135. The ceiling didn't really go up. JC getting that star, and Jake getting his 4th flame in a row, which is pretty wild. He's been 2nd or 3rd in 4 straight weeks. I don't think that's, not to knock his team, but I don't think that's truly reflective of how good his team is. I think it's just happened. But, I think there are better teams than him out there, but he's consistently been putting up the numbers, so it's hard to argue with. That is the top 25%. Now, the bottom 25%, the ice cold of week 8, Joey, pretty surprising appearance here, getting the trash can, and Tom getting the ice cube. Average score from these guys of 98. As I said, everyone scored over 100, so, I'm including the average of Saunders. That's why it goes down to a 98. But that is up 15% from last week of an 86. And just imagine if Devontae Adams put up 20 points. It still wouldn't have saved Saunders, but then the average would be over 100 of this bottom group, which would be pretty crazy. I think 86 last week was already tied for our highest we've seen of this average, and now we're up to 98. So it's pretty crazy. I wouldn't be surprised if this average dips back down next week. Not because of buys or anything. I just think everyone scoring over 100 is pretty crazy. We'll look at that here. So now week 6, 7, and 8, we've seen the trend that I expected to see. And I think, obviously we'll keep looking at this every year we do this, or I plan to keep looking at this every year we do this. I think we might see this a lot in these first 5, 6 weeks. There's just a lot of uncertainty. You don't know. There can be these crazy high scoring weeks from the top couple teams, and then the bottom couple teams being really bad. There's just a lot of uncertainty in these first couple weeks. And then I think we're at the point in the season now where who's good. And everyone's team is just getting that much better every week, and everything should be trending up. But like I said, I wouldn't be surprised to see this dip down. I think this is the smallest gap we've seen between the average of the top and the average of the bottom. Week 2 is weeks 1 and 2 is pretty close as well, and weeks 6. But yeah, it's getting a lot tighter now. You really have to do well every week to survive. Is what it seems. So looking towards tonight, I think this game is kind of lame. Titans at Steelers. Steelers are coming off a terrible loss at home, and now they're at home again against a worse team, arguably. But I'm curious if Levis is legit. I didn't think he was coming out of the draft. Putting mayo in your coffee doesn't exactly make me think you have great judgment, and I think you need good judgment to be a quarterback. But he looked hot. DeAndre Hopkins with a huge week. Speaking of which, Saunders had DeAndre Hopkins on his bench, starting him over Devontae Adams, which, why would he do that? But that would have saved him, in theory. We also got DeAndre Hopkins tonight. We'll see if he can repeat that. I don't know if he's being started. I believe... Who picked up DeAndre Hopkins? I had it written down. I'll get to it when it's on your slide. Someone got him for $1, so that was pretty good on that part. Henry. You also got Deontay Johnson, George Pickens, and Najee Harris tonight. I don't know if anyone's starting Warren. I think Tom has him. Tom hasn't really yet fixed his lineup yet. Yeah, I don't mind taking the Titans tonight if I were to bet on this. I like Levis to continue. Or we'll see, the really stout Steelers defense just give Levis a welcome to the NFL kind of game. I could see that happening too. So, yeah. And the Monday night game, this doesn't seem that interesting to me. I could see the Jets winning this just because the Chargers are kind of choke artists, but they've been better. They've looked better the last couple weeks, I'd say. But not a lot of starters. I think there's only 6. Herbert, Allen, and Eckler from the Chargers, and then Brees, Garrett Wilson, and the Jets D from the Jets. And I was looking around at who I think is on the block and who has players Monday night, and the only person that has a player Monday night that I think is on the block is Ben. And we'll get to that later on who I think is on the block, but it's no surprise. I think he's on the block with Christian McCaffrey on bye, and he has Garrett Wilson. So he may be relying on that on Monday. But Herbert, Allen, Eckler, Brees, Jet, I think those are all on teams I think are pretty safe. So you could see some of these guys get moved prior to Monday if someone needs to make a move to survive. Could be interesting. Who knows? Now the week 8 standings. JC moves up to the top, passing Joey and Ben. JC's had a good run here the last couple weeks, so he's gunned to the top. We'll see some teams being over 1,000 points on the year after this week, or at least we should. Jake Potter and Jack stay exactly where they are. Mitchell moves up. Ryan moves up big time ahead of the 2 people that are eliminated. And Ryan got 3rd. If we were still doing the top 3 gets the 25% flame, then Ryan would get a flame. But as we know, that is not the case. So poor Ryan does not get a flame. But I don't think he cares, so it doesn't matter. Tom and Cooper staying where they are. Yeah, that's about it from this week. Looking at the economy, now there's 265 left in circulation. That's not that big of a dip from last week. I think we were in the 300s last week. So not a ton of spending this week, which is good to see, I guess. I don't know what necessarily is good to see. If you have a lot of fab, then I guess that's good. If you don't have a lot of fab, that's bad to see because you want to see people spending so that you can kind of claw your way back up. We saw Jake this week dump everything he had in trades, actually, not in free agency. 20 for Derrick Henry and 5 on Mike Evans, I think. We'll get to that on his page, but he has no money left. The average of the league is $27, 10%. There's only 10 people left, so 10%. Only 4 people above this $27 mark, and that's Tom at the top, Potter pretty close, Ryan looking pretty good with 44, JC with 33. And I think these are 4 teams that are all good. Tom, I think, is the worst of these 4 teams, but he has the money. Potter, as you guys know, my previous week's betting favorite to win the whole thing is, I think he has a strong team, and he has basically the most fab in the league, pretty close to it, so I think he's in a good spot. Mitchell right below that mark. He didn't do much this week. I think he just acquired Brian Robinson, who will probably start this week. And then Cooper had 0, and now he has 20 because he did some trades. I forget off the top of my head, but I'll get to that on his slide. So he's in a better spot now than he was. Or no, the 20 was Derrick Henry. I know that. And Ben, he spent a bit last week, so now he's a little lower on this list, tied with Jack. They just did a trade for Garrett Wilson. Ben now has Garrett Wilson. And Joey at 4. Joey spent big on Herbert, so now he's down to 4. He's basically, all he's done is make a few big acquisitions. I think he overpaid for Herbert, but he also replaced a glaring need on his team and got the best quarterback available. So it's hard to argue with it, but now he just doesn't have much to spend anymore. So he's kind of stuck with the team he has, generally speaking. And Jake, as we already mentioned, has 0. So that is how the economy looks. as I predicted, the trend finally stopped of an above-average market share team getting eliminated. Now, Saunders got eliminated, who was second to last in Fab. He only had $5. Yeah, and now looking ahead, I don't think we'll see another high Fab team get eliminated. I like Potter, Ryan, and JC's chances of surviving. Tom is the only one who's somewhat questionable, and he could. But we're more likely to see a low Fab team again get eliminated. That's why it's getting really interesting. I think if we were to look at the teams above the line and the teams below the line, I think the teams above the line, if we just ignore Fab, are better teams on average than the teams below the line. There are good teams below the line, like Jack and Joey. But it seems like the teams that are good also have Fab, which means it's very good for them. And there are good teams here too, like I said, that are going to be fine probably in the short term. They just don't have much to spend going forward. But it's not a good look for the teams that are below the line, because I think there are some teams below the line that are also in a tough spot in the short term just with their players they already have. So I think we're going to continue to see some low Fab teams get eliminated. All right, the Jake-Ben rivalry. Jake's won 4 straight, I believe. He still does not have him on the total running points on the year. Ben still has that because of his hot 200-point week. But as we know, Jake's been in the top 25% 4 weeks straight. So it's hard to beat that if you're Ben. Looking at both their teams, keep in mind, I mean, these rankings, by the way, it thinks there's 18 teams because there are 18 teams, but really there's only 10 teams left. So if you're 9th or 10th in some of these categories, you're bottom of the league. So even though it's showing as blue, it's not showing them as red. So Ben, obviously, with Christian McCaffrey, this is the rest of season ranking, so Christian McCaffrey is still the RB1. And he's got some strength at flex, but not too much strength anywhere else. And Jake, kind of similar story. He's got his A.J. Brown here and Mahomes, and that's like the foundation of his team. Jordan Addison is pretty serviceable as his wide receiver too, but maybe not for long. We'll see, especially with Kirk Cousins going out. We don't know how that'll affect his production. But yeah, that's how we're looking with this rivalry here. Some Week 8 takeaways, the usual, tight ends and defenses. Only one top-scoring tight end, no top-scoring defenses last week. 2 top 3 scoring tight ends and 1 top 3 scoring defense. The tight ends had a decent average last week, better than the week before, of 11 with a standard deviation of about 5.5. Not that many low-scoring tight ends. This was, I don't actually know who this was. I don't think this is the team that got eliminated. Who did Saunders have? Okay, now I'm going to check. Give me 1 second. I should have checked before. Saunders had Pitts, so that's not... Pitts was here, so he was a lower scoring tight end. And at defense, he was okay as well. He had a 7-point scoring defense, so he's in here. The defenses were pretty consistent last week. Not like any like ridiculously high scores or ridiculously low scores. Average of about 9, standard deviation of about 4. Yeah, that's about it to say there. I mean, as I've said, defenses are a little less important now. I mean, obviously it's nice to get over 10 points from your defense, but the rest of your team can kind of make up for it now. But obviously if you have like a 20 to 30 point scoring defense, you're looking great, but there's just no way to really predict when that's going to happen. You could argue there is, but I don't think there is. So, yeah. Bye weeks this week. We got the Broncos, Lions, Jags, Niners. I mean, there's some big names out this week. No Christian McCaffrey, no ETN, no Kittle, no Laporta, no Jahmyr Gibbs or Montgomery, Amon-Ra. Broncos, I guess you got Javonte, you got Russell Wilson if you're starting him, Sutton. So there's some decent, even though these teams aren't like, I mean, the Lions, actually that's not true. The Lions, Jags, and Niners are all good teams. Broncos are kind of whatever, but a lot of good guys on bye this week. We got 4 on bye week 10 and 4 on bye in week 11. Week 10 is going to be huge, I think. This week we think Ben's in trouble because of no McCaffrey or Purdy, and I think someone else. Gibbs, who he traded for, is on bye. Evan Ingram. But week 10, I mean, I haven't looked across all the teams, but looking through the lens of the Jake versus Ben, Jake has Mahomes and A.J. Brown on bye, absolutely, definitely his two best players. The two guys who I've said are kind of the people that need to carry his team for him to be safe. I mean, they have every week. I mean, last week Mahomes was, I think, sick, so that's why he had a bad performance. But, he got pulled up by other guys on his team. But yeah, I think having those two guys on bye is going to be tough for Jake. And he also has 0 fab, so that's a bad look for him. Obviously we're not there yet to week 10, but I would imagine Jake will be in contention to get eliminated next week for sure. Now, something interesting I wanted to look at is what you could call the Grim Reapers of the league. The players that have been on the most teams that have gotten eliminated, and your leaders in that are CeeDee Lamb and DK Metcalf, have been on a team that gets eliminated 3 times each. DK got me and Mark and Kennedy, and CeeDee Lamb had me and Mark and I forget who the third was. You know who you are, but 3 each, and then we have a handful here that have gotten 2. Everyone else is 1 or 0, obviously. But also interesting to see where these players are now and if these trends continue. So JC has CeeDee Lamb and Jack has DK. These are good players. CeeDee Lamb's much better than DK right now. So I don't think CeeDee, it's just been a coincidence, I think, so far with CeeDee. DK Metcalf, I think there might be some truth to it. He's kind of a guy you have on your team. You can't bench him. Like, you know what he can do, but he's been underperforming, definitely. Like, he hasn't been putting up duds, but he's putting up like 8 points, and that's just not. He's probably everyone's on any team's wide receiver 1 or 2. So, yeah, it hurts to start him when he only puts up single-digit points. And then, let's see, Darren Waller's on Mitchell's team, but he's hurt now, so he probably is getting benched. These are only if you started the person, by the way. If someone was on someone's bench, I'm not counting it. Lamar, surprisingly, has 2. He's had some bad weeks earlier in the season. Potter, my right now predictor to win the whole thing, Potter has Lamar. So we'll see how that goes. Josh Jacobs has 2. Niners defense has 2. Puka has 2. Surprisingly, Puka. You wouldn't think that, but he does. And Christian Kirk also has 2. And that's on Ryan's team. Puka's on Jack. Jack has a lot here. He's got DK, Puka, and 49ers, 3 of which are on this list. But I think Jack has a great team, so I'm not too worried about Jack. All right, into our normal graphs. Next week versus rest of season. We see Mitchell way down here again. This is where he was last week, and it didn't matter. He was right in the middle of the pack last week. Wasn't even in the bottom 25%, so if he can just do that again, then maybe he doesn't care that he sits right here on this graph. Ben, as we know, is also looking pretty bad for this week, but he's looking a little better for rest of season. Actually, he is the second lowest projected for the rest of season, but looks really bad this week. Tom is also not looking great on either the rest of season or this week. He traded away Bijan. I don't think that was a fantastic move. I thought he had a great trio of running backs. There could be an argument to be made about the Falcons not using Bijan well enough, and maybe he wouldn't continue to improve or even continue to be good at all. I mean, who knows? I mean, Arthur Smith is kind of an idiot, so we'll see. So it could end up being a good move that he traded away Bijan while he still had value. Jake and Cooper in the top left, where they're looking pretty good this week, but they don't have great rest of season projections. And then Ryan, Potter, Joey, Jack, and all the way at the top right, JC are looking pretty good in both. Ryan's floating more towards the middle, but still looks good for both. I think he's fine. Now your Fantasy Pros versus Sleeper projection for this week. Mitchell and Ben, same story. They're both not looking great this week. Tom, same story. Looks a little better than Mitchell and Ben, but still not in a great spot. Cooper, Fantasy Pros likes Cooper's team a lot more than Sleeper. Jake and Ryan right around the middle. And then our same, power group up here, Joey, Jack, JC, Potter, are looking pretty fine. Like, it'd be very surprising to see one of those 4 go this week, that is. Now, position strength versus budget. Well, I guess we'll start with Mitchell again. He's way down on the position strength chart. I think he's got, he's kind of lacking at wide receiver. And with Laporta out, I mean, this is rest of season position strength. So this is including Laporta being in his lineup. He's still last. Now he has Laporta out. That's why Laporta's really been a stud for him, honestly. Not many tight ends have been as consistent as Laporta this year, unless you have like Kelsey, Mark Andrews, Kittle. Like Laporta's a dude. And he has about average budget, as we saw. He's just below the average. Jake, no fab left to spend. His team is okay. I mean, he and Ben are tied for the second worst position strength left, but Ben has more fab, so Ben has a slightly better outlook. Cooper is a little stronger than Ben and has about the same amount of fab. Joey and Jack, we know they have really good teams. They just have spent a lot. Joey only has $4. Jack has $15. And then Tom, I've mentioned his team looks kind of iffy right now. He could be a candidate to go this week. Moving on from Bijan, and I don't think he got a lot of stuff in return. I mean, he got, what did he get? Olave, Warren, and someone else. It was Warren, he's not starting. Olave and whoever else he is starting. So he got 2 starters out of Bijan, so there is something to be said about that if both of those guys can do well. But anyway, we have our top right here. Ryan and Potter and JC all have strong teams and have money to spend. So yeah, these guys are in great positions. And Tom, if he can survive, is also in a great position. He just needs to really start doing something with the fab. Tom is taking, I feel like, Ryan's approach to the more extreme, where he's really riding that line of risky every week. Brian was riding that risky line for a while, but now he's in a good spot and still has fab, so I think Tom needs to quickly make some moves here, or he's not going to last too much longer, I think. Overall summary here, I think the top right, solid overall, stayed mostly the same, except I flipped Jack and Joey. I moved Joey over to the left for the good in the short term, questionable long term, because he basically burned the rest of his fab on Herbert. So if I look at his team as it is, which in theory his team can't get that much better if he has 0 fab. He probably lasts a good 3 to 4 more weeks with his team before I start thinking he's in the danger zone, or before I think his team is not good enough to survive. Jack just made his team better. I think Jack absolutely won the free agency / just acquisitions, trades, all that this week. He made some great moves, and we'll get to that on his slide. And now he got fab back and made his team better, in my opinion. So he definitely deserves now to be, for the first time, in this green group, along with JC, Potter, and Ryan. I guess we'll hit on each of those. JC, he has ETN and Javonte Williams on bye. He still has an elite team even after those guys, and he adds DeAndre Hopkins. There we go. JC was the one who added DeAndre Hopkins for $1. Might not start him, but it's a decent depth acquisition for $1, so we'll take it. Potter, he adds Devontae Adams to his already stud trio. I mean, I'm including Justin Jefferson in the trio, even though he's hurt. And now you have, who knows if Justin Jefferson will even come back now. That kind of sucks if he doesn't, but it could happen if the Vikings just tank. Maybe they're good with Jaron Hall, but anyway, adds Adams to that group, so now he has 4 and 3 that are startable right now. So I like that. I think Adams had an off week. He's had a couple off weeks, but I love, we've seen it before when teams come off of a head coach firing and they just go nuts the next week. So I could see Devontae Adams putting up 30 points next week. Watch it. He'll be the fantasy performer of the week next week. He'll be on the first slide. Calling it now. The only thing I have questionable about his team is that he has Jerome Ford as his RB2 right now. But he has money to spend, so that's the only weak point of his team. He's probably fine. Jerome Ford's fine. Ryan now, he has a really solid wide receiver core. He's got 4 starting. He goes and grabs Moss from Ben to fill in at RB2, and that's pretty serviceable. Ryan's got a decent amount on bye this week with Ayuk and Christian Kirk and Jared Goff and Montgomery. Montgomery's still hurt, but I think after the bye he should come back, so that's a good look for Ryan. So I forget who Ryan's starting at quarterback. It might have been Sam Howell or someone that I don't love, but I don't think it'll matter. I think if he can make it past this week, he's looking fine. And he should. He's got other guys to hold up his team. Jack has Burrow. Jack got Burrow for free, guys. Like, if I was still in the league, I would have jumped all over Burrow. Like, I know it was hard to look past how bad he started the season, but I knew if he could get that calf right, that he'd go back to full speed, and then he'd be hitting his stride mid-season, late season, as opposed to early season. We'll see probably some quarterbacks start strong and then not end strong, and you want the quarterbacks that are going to end strong. So I think having Burrow is going to be great for the long run for Jack. I know that's my bias talking a little bit, but he also gets Bijan, which I love that move too. He gets a stud running back, and we'll see, like I said, how Bijan plays out on the Falcons offense. I think he's probably fine though. Also gets Puka. That's a good move. I like the trade he did for Puka. We'll get to that. He's got Amon-Ra on bye, Ridley on bye in the Niners defense. He has some fab now. Like, he doesn't have nothing. He's in the bottom. He's below the average market share, but he's got a little bit to tinker around with. And having Kelsey obviously makes you pretty good when you have the best tight end in the league. So I like the look of his team. Joey, still solid all around. I just don't like that he overspent on Herbert, and now that's why I moved him over here. I think he's bought himself into 4 more weeks of being very safe, but after that I don't know. That's why I don't think he'll win the league in this position, but I could be proven wrong. And Jake, he's out of the red this week. I think he's good in the short term because of who he's added, but questionable long term, especially week 10, as I mentioned, with who he has on bye. He has no buys this week, so another reason why he's probably safe this week is he's got the full power of his team right now. He had Mike Evans, and as we know, late last week he grabbed Henry. So his RBs are okay. He's got Njoku at tight end, which I don't love, but he's probably okay enough to survive this week, but he has no fab, which I don't like. Bottom right, Cooper. I think he's got a pretty solid team. He made some good moves to gain some fab back. He got 20 for Henry. He's a little iffy at the flex. I think he has Ramondre and DeMarcado, the Cardinals running back. So some okay flexes, but I think they're a little iffy. He also has no one on bye, so I think he's probably okay. That $20 I think gives him some promise for the long term. That's why I've put him here. But I do think this week he's not completely safe, so that's why I have him here. Tom, I've mentioned, I don't like that he lost Bijan. Besides his 2 running backs that he has left in Jonathan Taylor and Kenneth Walker, I think his team is very, very weak. So he's pretty vulnerable, I think, at almost every other position. And Kittle being on bye is really going to hurt him. He does have the most fab in the league, so if he can survive, he's got a good, promising long term. But I think if he survives, next week, he needs to start making moves, big moves, to improve his wide receivers, quarterback. Yeah. Into the red. Not really a surprise. Ben and Mitchell, the 2 that were in the red in all 3 of the charts. Hard to argue with these 2 being here. Ben with Christian McCaffrey, Purdy, Jahmyr Gibbs, and Ingram on bye. His running backs are looking pretty bad this week, but there's a chance they could be serviceable enough. His other questionable point is with Taysom Hill at tight end, which obviously he's coming off of 2 big weeks, but there's absolutely still the chance that he could just dud and give you less than 3 points. But the way I've seen the Saints starting to use him, it seems like they're going to keep doing it because they've had success. I wouldn't imagine they just stop doing that. So it's probably fine. A big week from Taysom could really save him. He's starting both Commanders receivers, both McLaurin and Dotson. I mean, they've both had good weeks together in the past. I never loved that because they're kind of fighting for the volume there, but we'll see how that plays out. And Mitchell, he had Waller in, but Waller's now out, so he really needs a tight end. Hence why his weekly projection was so low on those graphs, is because it's had a 0 for him at tight end. So he could be looking a little better if he grabs a tight end. I looked at the waivers. There's some decent ones out there. So he'll probably be fine. But he does need his wide receivers to step up again. I don't love them, but they're all guys that can do well. I think it's Elijah Moore, Tyler Boyd, Gabe Davis, and I'm gonna look. Josh Downs. So I think Josh Downs is like his most consistent guy, and then Gabe Davis and Tyler Boyd are touchdown dependent, and they both play each other Sunday night, which is kind of fun. And then Elijah Moore is I don't love Elijah Moore, but he doesn't have any other options right now, at least on his team. He could put in Brian Robinson at his flex. He hasn't done that yet. But if his running backs can carry him, if Tua can have a big shootout against Kansas City, then maybe he's fine. But having Laporta on bye is really going to hurt him, I think. All right, I think I stuck on this slide for long enough. Let's move on. JC's team. Big week from Lamb, as we already mentioned. Jalen Hurts always in there. ETN's been a stud. ETN's on bye this week, but it doesn't matter. He's got Rashad White filling in, and that's still a top 5 RB2 according to the analytics. He's got great receivers. So even though he's got some big name RBs on bye, I think he feels fine about his team. His other guys will step up right now. I don't think he has D-Hop in, but he could start him. Could be a boom-bust play this Thursday night, but I don't think he needs a boom-bust play. He probably just needs a consistent play, so he's either starting Chuba, or he could also be starting Jacoby Myers, so we'll see how he plays that. Jacoby Myers could be a similar story about the Raiders popping off after they fire their head coach, so maybe that's the play. But his second star gets a second star. Now Jake's team, A.J. Brown and Gus Edwards leading the way. Gus, I know Jake wants to know the weekly points per fab of Gus Edwards. I mean, I think, he started him for 1 week and spent 2 fab, so that's 14. Right now he's sitting at a 14 weekly points per fab, which is obviously great, but we'll see if that continues. I don't think Gus Edwards is a viable RB2 in 3 weeks, maybe. I mean, I could be wrong. He could prove me wrong, but that's just my take on it. Lockett also with a good week. He adds Mike Evans to the group. As we already mentioned, 4 straight top 25% showings, which is pretty impressive. But I don't love that he dumped the rest of his fab on what I see as short-term solutions. Mike Evans is good. Probably will only be a flex play in a couple weeks, and then towards the very end, maybe not startable. And that's what you kind of need to start thinking about, at least. I mean, you don't have to listen to me, but you want to get those guys that you could actually see yourself starting if you make it to the championship, or make it to even the last 4 weeks. If you can't see yourself starting someone in that time frame, then is it really worth spending fab on them? And that's, I guess, for each person to decide. If you think, in Ben's case, where he's in a tough spot this week, moves that he makes, fab that he spends could buy him at least into next week, and that's better than being eliminated. But then you don't have a great outlook for the future. So it's riding that line, I guess. But he gets Derrick Henry and Mike Evans in trades, as we already mentioned. Gets Jerome Ford and Njoku on waivers for free, which those are some decent claims. I think he looks like he's starting Njoku this week. Could be okay, maybe not, who knows. But yeah, that is Jake's team. Oh, I forgot to edit these. Did I forget to edit these numbers up here? Yeah, so top right, my bad. You can ignore them. JC was in first, Jake's in second. I forgot to update those, but that's okay. That's the only thing I forgot. I'm kind of in a rush this week, so that's why it's coming out a little later. Anyway, Ryan's team. Waddle leading the way, finally has a big breakout week. Eckler and Devonta Smith also having good weeks. Ryan's getting his Alabama wide receivers in use. As we mentioned, he's got Howell starting this week, so I don't love that, but the rest of his team is great. Gets Zach Moss to fill in at RB2, and that's pretty serviceable. Thielen's been a stud. Hawkinson, great. I like T as his flex too. I don't know if that's actually what he's doing, but this is from what's it called? Fantasy Pros just puts in the most optimal lineup according to what they think. So it doesn't actually mean that's how you have it set right now. But it looks like Ryan does. Ryan does have T. Higgins in, benching Michael Thomas. He gets Christian Kirk for $1, which is pretty nice. I mean, he's on bye, so I think that's how you can get away with getting someone like that for cheap. I don't see how Christian Kirk finds his way into this lineup unless he has someone on bye. I guess he has Devonta Smith on bye and Jalen Waddle on bye next week. So actually, Christian Kirk will definitely make his starting lineup next week, most likely. And Ayuk will be back. Montgomery will be back. So Ryan looks good. I think he needs to. This week there's a little bit of a question mark, but not really. But if he makes it past it, then he's looking a little better. But then you could argue week 10 he's got some buys too that are going to make him questionable again. But anyway, still has plenty of fab to work with. I don't see, this is like going back to what I said, 7 fab for Moss. I mean, yeah, he's going to help you this week, but you probably don't start him ever again after this week. I don't know. So was that worth $7? Were you really in that tough of a spot if you were to, let's say, what would he have had to do? Drop Michael Thomas and pick up someone on waivers? Like, I don't know. Maybe. To be determined, I guess. But Ryan's team's looking pretty good now after starting off pretty shaky. Potter, I like his team. He trades away Gibbs after Gibbs has a great week, so he sells high on him. I'm completely fine with that, especially because he's now on bye this week, and then when he comes back, Montgomery might take over the workload again, so he might have sold him at the perfect time, and I love Gibbs, and I have him in another league, and I want Gibbs to be the guy there, so I hope he is, but I think that's me being biased. I think selling high on Gibbs was the perfect move here. He gets Deontay Johnson in free agency, Mike Evans, who ends up trading away to get Ford. So that means who picked up Ford? I'm trying to draw this all together. So Jake traded away Ford after acquiring him for 0. Okay, so that's how this all played out. Anyway, gets Devontae Adams, as I mentioned, add to the stud receiver core and then the Ravens defense. He spent $17 on that, but then he gets $21 back in trades where he trades away Gibbs and trades away Mike Evans. So pretty good, and he gets Nico Collins and Jerome Ford. So I like these moves, especially your net positive in fab, and you didn't make your team worse. You could argue you made it better. I'm all about selling high. So Cooper Kupp's had some whatever weeks. I think he'll bounce back, but good-looking team here, I would say. Ben makes some questionable moves this week, in my opinion. He's the one that buys high on Gibbs, and he also sells low on Puka. So I just think that's the opposite of how I would do anything. I would never buy high and sell low. Like, that's just not what I would do. I mean, you could argue maybe you don't think Puka is going to be much. Now that it sounds like Stafford's hurt, so now they're going to have a backup quarterback, and I feel like the backup quarterback's just going to like funnel it to Cooper Kupp, but I could be wrong. But I guess there is some questionableness there with Puka. But I feel like he sold him at his absolute floor and bought Gibbs at his absolute ceiling. So we'll see how that plays out for him. He's in a tough spot this week with McCaffrey out. I mean, if he makes it past this week, he's got McCaffrey, Gibbs, and Achane is coming back. I haven't looked at Achane and when he's supposed to come back, but he's probably got to be coming back somewhat soon. Right now he's got Dak in at quarterback. His running backs are it's bad. Like, he's got the worst in the league RB1 and the worst in the league RB2 because 10 is the lowest. He's also got the worst flex 1 according to this. Doesn't like Jahan Dotson. He just had a hot week, but I doubt he does it again. Taysom could carry him. Like, I think Dak's been hot. He could keep being hot. Garrett Wilson could have a big week on Monday night to save him. Between Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson, you could argue one of those guys has to have a good week. It's unlikely they both have bad weeks. And then Taysom, if he puts up 25 points again, then you're looking fine. Steelers' defense could be good. Yeah, I'm rambling, but I think I don't love the moves he made this week, but he could survive past this week. He's definitely in a tough spot, though, for sure. Jack, as we mentioned, big week from Burrow, and I think we'll continue to see that going forward. I like Brees. I like Garrett Wilson. Well, he traded away Garrett Wilson, but good week from him last week. He gets Bijan. He builds on to his already strong team. DK, like I mentioned, as his wide receiver 1. We got one of the potential Grim Reapers here as his wide receiver 1. And Puka, who we'll have to see how he does if Stafford doesn't play. But having Kelsey, he's got good flexes, good RB 1 and 2. Burrow's good. So his wide receivers concern me slightly, but not enough to the point where I think he's at any risk this week of getting eliminated. He's got Amon-Ra, Ridley on bye this week, so he'll be better at wide receiver once they come back. But ultimately, I love the moves he made this week. I think he won the week in terms of acquisitions and moves. So he's looking good. A little more fab in the bank to spend. 15. Now Mitchell's team. He's consistently found a way to be a middle of the pack team, even though projections put him towards the bottom. And we see again here, he's not looking great. He needs to fill in a tight end, and then he's got the worst wide receiver 1, worst wide receiver 2, and worst flex 2. Wait, is this not? This is Brian Robinson. Thought it was Jahan Dotson at first. But he's got good running backs, and Tua, as I mentioned. If those guys can hold him up, he'll be good. Laporta being out really, really hurts. And then Sutton being out also hurts. I think he would start him probably this week. But, yeah, Mitchell is in another tough spot, but he's hoping his guys can pull it out again and get him to see another week. Now Cooper's team, another top performance from Josh Allen. He's been looking good. Joe Mixon finally looks like he's coming into his own here. I think with the Bengals offense being back, I think Mixon is also back. Josh Jacobs is good. He gets Amari DiMercato for free, and I think he's starting him in his flex right now. I think the analytics says Madison's a better start, but right now I think he's got Amari in. He gets Madison in the trade where he trades away Derrick Henry. I love that move from him, going from especially a team that has 0 fab gets 20 for Derrick Henry, and he gets Mixon, I think, in free agency last week for 8. So just good moves there. I think that's smart money moves right there. And now he has 20 to spend for the future. So I think this week he's about an average team, I'd say, but he can build upon it with that fab he has. But I would say watch out. Josh Allen can have some bad weeks, and the Bengals have gave him some trouble before, so watch out for that. If he's going into Sunday needing a big game from Josh Allen, could be a tough look, but we'll see. Now we're into the bottom 25%. First up is Tom, getting his 4th. I don't think these are all in a row, but obviously he hasn't had a top performance in between any of them. So 4 ice cubes now, but he's still alive. Kittle led the way last week, but now he's on bye. He makes no acquisitions in free agency, but he does that trade where he gets Olave, Pitts, and Jalen Warren for Bijan. So he gets 2 starters in Olave and Pitts, and really just a 1-week start for Pitts, and then Kittle's back. So Olave is the only real starter he got out of this. Warren is already a fringe flex play. He's just if you want like a guaranteed 8 points. I mean, I've told you this, my thoughts on Warren. I think he's great if you want 8 points, but we're reaching the point where you need a little more than that. You need people that have a little bit higher of a ceiling. But floor plays are always good. He's not starting him this week from what I've seen, at least right now, but he could. I know he's a Steelers fan, so maybe he would put in Warren to play tonight. TBD on that. He got the Cowboys defense late last week, and that was a good acquisition for him. One of his top scorers last week. Sitting at 56 fab. He now only has a stud duo of running backs, I would say, and no longer the trio when he had Bijan, but he needs to do something with that fab to pick it up here if he survives. Now we got Joey. Spending 18 on Herbert. I guess this kind of gets repetitive. He only has 4 fab left, kind of dumped it all on Herbert. Now his team looks really solid across the board, except I think once you look like 4 weeks ahead, what's he going to do with 4 fab? Unless he trades some of these guys away, but there are guys here you don't want to trade away. You don't want to trade away Mark Andrews or Diggs or these guys that are top guys in their respective positions that you could see starting in the all the way into the championship. But sad to see Cousins go out, but he gets Herbert to fill in. That's all we got here for Joey. Gets his first bad accolade of the season. And finally, one last look at Saunders. He dies with only 5 fab. Essentially, Devontae Adams put the dagger into his team on Monday night. There wasn't a lot of hope, but there was some, and Devontae Adams did not pull through. He definitely struggled at running back. Our running backs were Brian Robinson and Jerome Ford last week, I believe, and because he traded away Walker. His wide receivers didn't get it done. DK and Devontae Adams. All of his wide receivers except for Mike Evans scored single digits. And Mike Evans almost had a terrible game too on Thursday until he put up a touchdown. Just nothing special was going on here. Herbert had a good game and that was it. The rest of his team really just they didn't do it. They didn't get it done. So unfortunately that's just how it goes. 78 points. Now my classic hot takes. You know what it is. I'm not changing my take here on Potter. He hasn't done anything that's made me think he's put himself out of his good position, so I'm leaving him there. Also leaving Ryan as my honorable mention. I considered putting Jack in here because of the moves he's made, and I'm biased, and I like that he has Burrow, and he got him for free. He's just made good use of his little money that he's had, and he's in a great spot. His team right now is probably better than Ryan. Not probably. It is better than Ryan's. It just he doesn't have as much fab as Ryan. I think Ryan will be smart with that fab and continue to be a top team. Now, my prediction to get eliminated this week. We got Ben. Last week it was Jake. This week it was Ben. I was wrong about Jake last week. He was a top 25% scorer because his guys got it done. You know, it's not easy to predict who gets eliminated, but I'm going to try every week. This week I've got Ben. I think without McCaffrey, you're going to see it happen. And then I'd be curious to see how McCaffrey goes on waivers. I mean, I'm getting ahead of myself here, but I'd be really curious to see. Someone could dump literally everything they have on McCaffrey, and it might not be a dumb move. Honorable mention. I'm keeping Mitchell in my honorable mention. I mean, last week I had him in this spot. I didn't love how his team looked, but then they got it done, and he was a middle of the pack team. I don't think he made his team that much better by adding Brian Robinson, so I think he needs that to happen again. He needs all of his guys to step up again, and I have a hard time seeing it happen twice. So I think he is in a tough spot this week. Actually, I'm going to have even a bolder take. I would be absolutely shocked if anyone but one of these two gets eliminated this week. Unless, obviously, something changes between now and Sunday. So, not that it's a 50-50, unless you really, really take my word as truth. But that's my take. I think I'd have a really hard time. Some other team would really have to, poop the bed for one of these two not to get eliminated. So that is my hot take. Now on to the power rankings. I think JC has remained, I'm keeping him at the 1. I had Joey drop down to 5. I had him in 2 last week, so I have everyone that was 3, 4, 5 move up to 2, 3, 4. Except I think I moved, no. Jack was 3, so I moved these 3 up 1. I think they deserve that spot. Joey, just because he doesn't have the fab. I don't love his future outlook, so it's hard. He definitely has a top 3 team right now, but I'm trying to include future projections here as well, so I think he's in a tough spot for the future without fab. Cooper at 6. I think he was at 6 last week or right around it. He has a little bit of fab now, so I think he's in an okay spot right around the middle of the pack in terms of fab and the strength of his team right now, so I think 6 is a perfect spot for him. Tom, I think his team is bad enough right now that even though he has the most fab, I think he's a bottom half of the league team until he does something with that fab. But once he does something with that fab, then he doesn't have fab. So then he's kind of he might be like a Joey where his team is good. So it's hard. I'm going to have a hard time seeing Tom's team go up that far unless he really makes some smart moves. And Ben at 8. Once you get McCaffrey and Gibbs back, maybe I'll reconsider bumping him up a little bit. But right now, I don't love the look of it. In general, also not having a ton of fab left to spend. Hence why I have Jake here. I don't think he has the 9th worst team right now, but having 0 fab hurts you a lot. I could have honestly put him at 10, but I'm going to keep Mitchell here at 10. I just think the wide receivers are a problem. And yeah, I've already kind of given my takes on the wide receivers. They need to pull it out again for him to survive. But I think Ben is in a slightly tougher spot this week without McCaffrey. Mitchell's got it done with the team he has right now, except minus Laporta now. And Ben, I don't know. I think McCaffrey's been carrying him this entire time, and we'll see. I mean, he's had other guys be good, but McCaffrey I think is really gonna give him the dagger here. That's my take. Good luck, everyone. I'm surprised these videos. Man, this is almost 50 minutes. So I'm sorry about that. I talked a lot. Yeah. Those are my takes this week. Good luck. Don't get eliminated. And hopefully I'll see you guys next week.